Well, thank you very much, Lila, and good afternoon, everyone. We're so honored you're here today. Thank you for spending the day with us. It's a privilege and an honor to welcome you back to Stanford. And I thought what I would do here in the next few minutes is to give you an overview of some of the work we've been doing, but most importantly, to leave some time so that I can respond to your questions and get your feedback. So let's see. So we've launched several new and I think important collaborations over the past year and a half. And let me describe each of those just very briefly. You know, we sit in the center of Silicon Valley here, and in a very real sense, Stanford University played a major role in the development of Silicon Valley. And what we're seeing now is the digital transformation of health and healthcare. Digital transformation from consumer-facing devices and also from the opportunities that artificial intelligence and machine learning are able to bring to the way in which we deliver care to our patients. So we've established a Center for Digital Health in order to make sure that we're leveraging the strengths we have around this great university and the interests of our faculty and students in developing digital technologies and deploying them in patient care settings. We also launched last year with Verily, which is formerly Google Life Sciences prior to the restructuring of Google into Alphabet, a project called Baseline. The Baseline project is a 10,000 person longitudinal cohort study that will measure everything we can imagine about human health. So whole genome sequencing, microbiome. Verily developed its own wearable specifically for this study. And the 10,000 people enrolled in this study will be followed for at least 4 years. And for the first time, we'll have the baseline information needed to determine when disease does occur. Were there indications early on of that the disease was going to occur? A third of the patients in this study will be, a third of the participants in the study will be healthy today, a third have been or are being treated for cancer, and a third have been or are being treated for heart disease. We partnered with Duke in launching this study in order to have a more demographically representative population, and we're going to open centers in other areas as well. So I'm excited about Baseline in terms of what it will enable. I mean, think about, you know, just last year, the Framingham study celebrated its 60th anniversary. And think about the enormous amount of valuable, actionable information that has come over these years from Framingham. And compared to Baseline, Framingham is an extraordinarily simple study. I mean, there are a small number of parameters that are being tracked. Of course, having the advantage of tracking them for 60 years and now tracking them in some cases with the grandchildren of some of the original participants is tremendously valuable. But Baseline, over probably even a shorter period of time, will offer, we believe, even more powerful insights into the determinants of disease. And of course, if we're better able to predict when disease will occur, we'll be better able to prevent it from occurring in the first place or to diagnose it much earlier. We also launched a collaboration with Apple last year called the Apple Heart Study. You know, the Apple Watch today is the most commonly used heart rate monitor. And the Apple Heart Study uses the heart rate sensor in the watch, looking at both rate and rhythm, combined with the accelerometer information in the watch and in your iPhone, in order to make an inference about whether or not changes in rate or rhythm are related to activity level, or if they're not related to changes in activity, could they be an indication of an arrhythmia such as atrial fibrillation? You know, we know that AFib is the most common arrhythmia, but we don't really know its prevalence. And even more importantly, we don't know the treatment guidelines for AFib are not as precise as they need to be, as they should be. We don't, you know, we have some broad age-related criteria about who should or shouldn't be anticoagulated. But in particular, for intermittent AFib, we don't really have good treatment guidelines and protocols. We hope that through the Apple Heart Study, we're the participating institution in terms of actually doing the research related to the study. We hope that through the Apple Heart Study, we'll be able to determine first whether or not watch can be used to detect arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation, and then to be able to actually garner the information that will enable us to make much more accurate, precise recommendations about treatments and interventions. And finally, and certainly this morning, you heard a lot of discussion about the excitement I think all of us in medicine today have for cell and gene therapy. It's really phenomenal to look back over these past 5, and in the case of checkpoint inhibitors, about 10 years, to see how the face of cancer therapy has been changed because of the way we're able to leverage the immune system of each of us as an individual to treat cancer. I think we're only scratching the surface, but we wanted to make sure that we're an institution, we're an academic medical center where the future of cell and gene therapy is going to be defined first through the fundamental research that's being done and then translated into patients. So we've made some key faculty recruitments over the past 4 to 5 years. We also opened a GMP, Good Manufacturing Principles facility on California Avenue to make the cell therapies that are being delivered to our patients here in our hospitals. And we expect to see a lot of exciting advances coming in the months and years ahead. Of course, each year we welcome new students, we welcome new leaders. You know, I'm oftentimes asked as I look back over my first 5.5 years at Stanford, what am I most proud of? Where do I think we've really made progress? And there are several areas that I feel really good about. But the one that I'm most pleased about, and many in this room have helped make it happen, is the way we've markedly increased the diversity of our student body. We've more than doubled the enrollment of students from backgrounds underrepresented in medicine in our MD and PhD programs over the past 5 years. And now we stand out in the country as being a leader in the recruitment and the retention and the development of an inclusive atmosphere here at Stanford. That's the way we're going to change the face and the character of medicine. I think it's incumbent upon Stanford as a leading academic medical center, or a leading research university, to take the lead. We've also made considerable progress in the gender diversity of leaders around the School of Medicine. So I've had the privilege in the past 5 years of hiring 7 clinical department chairs, 4 women and 3 men. And we'll see these trends continue moving forward. I'm very excited that our new president and provost, Mark Tessier-Levine and Persis Drell, also have a very firm commitment to diversity and inclusion. And I think as the university long-range plan rolls out here in the weeks and months ahead, we'll see some prominent initiatives to leverage what's been done in the past, but carry it even further in the future. Another thing that we've done with regard to graduate education, PhD education, I spoke a little bit about this last year, but is to change the funding model for PhD students. You know, the previous funding model has been that the first year or so of PhD education is usually paid for by a training grant or maybe from departmental resources. But then after that, PhD students need to go on the host grant of the faculty members with whom they're working. And there are a lot of misaligned incentives in that because, you know, a student may really want to work with a particular faculty member, but that faculty member may not have a slot on his or her grant. So we made the bold commitment now, almost 5 years ago, that we would fund the first 4 years of PhD education entirely through philanthropy and training grants. And I think that's had a transformative impact on our students and on our faculty. It certainly has made our graduate programs, which have always been attractive, I think, it's made them even more attractive. And we just got the statistics on the class that will be coming in to our PhD program starting in the summer or the fall. And we're seeing a yield of about 67%. 67% of the students offered admission are actually going to come here, offered PhD admission. And what I'm even more proud of is that 3/4, 75% of the students from backgrounds underrepresented in biomedicine who've been offered admission to our PhD programs have accepted. So those are some of the things that are going on in our educational programs and in leadership. Let me see if we can, there we go. As Lila mentioned, we've had a strategic vision to lead the biomedical revolution in precision health, with the 3 components of precision health being to predict, prevent, and cure precisely. And over this past year, we've been engaged in an integrated strategic planning process, integrated in that it brings together the School of Medicine, Stanford Healthcare, and Lucile Packard Children's Hospital, Stanford Children's Health, bringing us all under one umbrella to plan our collective futures in the next 7 to 10 years. There's been so much excitement and engagement around this project. We have an outline of the plan. We've discussed the plan now with the boards of the 2 hospitals, and we'll be giving the University Board of Trustees an overview at the June meeting of the University Board. I think that as we begin to look at things in a more integrated fashion, we see lots of opportunities for building programs that where the strengths of the School of Medicine combined with the amazing clinical facilities of the hospitals are able to have transformative impact. So the process involved in this strategic plan, we began by a survey of everyone in Stanford Medicine, over 20,000 sent out electronically. We got responses from several thousand of those, and what we found is that, no surprise, people have a strong sense of the mission and values of being at Stanford Medicine, but what they wanted more of was an understanding of the priorities and how we were going to go about achieving and attaining those priorities. From the feedback of that survey and interviews, we assembled 13 working groups. Those working groups went out and canvassed hundreds of people, and we got thousands of ideas back. And from that, we've assembled an overview of what we think we can accomplish over the next 7 to 10 years. And the overview encompasses 3 strategic priorities that we want to be value-focused, digitally driven, and uniquely Stanford. Let me talk about each of those briefly. Value-focused, in an area of healthcare, in the healthcare we deliver, we want to be delivering unparalleled quality of care. I mean, people who come to Stanford and who trust their lives and their care to us should always know that they're getting the very best. And increasingly, delivering that quality is going to mean that we have to be more conscious of the cost of the care, of the delivery of that care. We are in a very expensive part of the country, and the health care that we deliver here is very expensive. There are lots of factors in that. The fact that in order to provide a sustainable wage for those people working here, our salaries need to be high. But we have to be looking every step of the way at how we can achieve greater efficiency. And in that regard, having this integrated approach, making sure that we're not duplicating services or elements that we should be coming together and sharing, that plays a key part in achieving greater value. But value is not just restricted to the care delivery area. Also, how can we achieve greater value in our research mission? You know, I can't begin to count the number of requests that I see when we're recruiting new faculty for confocal microscopes. But I do wonder, and we have started moving in this direction, that why don't we establish a series of confocal microscope centers at various locations in buildings across the School of Medicine. Staff those with skilled personnel that make sure that the instruments are running normally and that the preparation is done in an appropriate way. Couldn't we achieve greater efficiency, from that? And couldn't we also accelerate the pace of research because those instruments were being seen, overseen, and maintained in a more collective way? So value also will have a lot of manifestations and opportunities in the research arena as well. Second element, second theme priority is digitally driven. I mentioned that before, but I think when we think of digital health, and certainly we're reading a lot about it today, we're seeing a lot of investments in digital health startups. We can think about two fundamental components. One are consumer-facing devices and technologies, things like the smartwatches that we wear or the Fitbits or other things that enable us to know more about our health and the status of our body. Then the second related area is the artificial intelligence machine learning interpretation of the vast amounts of data that exists out there, including the data that's coming from these wearables that are now becoming more and more common. You know, majority of the digital data coming in for storage today is health and healthcare related. And that proportion of digital data related to health is going to grow with time. So how do we really extract information from the vast amounts of data that exist there? I think there are real opportunities. As we look at other sectors of the economy, digital technologies have disrupted and, if you will, democratized vast segments of the economy, making things that had only been accessible to a small portion of the population now accessible to many, many more people. It's estimated, for example, that by the year 2020, over 80% of adults on the planet will have a smartphone. 80% of adults on the planet. That's an example of the democratization of digital technologies from the vast lowering of the cost of providing those technologies. But we haven't really leveraged digital technologies in health and healthcare the way they've affected and impacted every other sector of the economy. So lots of opportunity moving forward there. You know, I'm occasionally on a panel with a venture capitalist whose offices are just around the corner here on Sand Hill Road. I won't use names, but when I'm on a panel with him, he likes to begin by looking at me and saying, you know, I'm going to put you and your medical school out of business in the next decade. And you know, there are a lot of things that concern me about the future of health, healthcare, and medicine, but being put out of business is not one of them. I don't think if this is done correctly and appropriately, you know, digital technologies are not going to put physicians or other healthcare professionals out of business, but the high-tech approach that they offer should enable all of us to deliver the high-touch medicine that in recent years has become increasingly difficult to do. We're sponsoring on June 4th a national symposium here in this room on electronic health records. Now, EHRs, and most of you probably work with one. When I was much more actively seeing patients than I am today, I was interfacing with one every day. Sometimes it seemed like every minute of every day. But you know, the average primary care doctor today spends 2 additional hours per day doing documentation of the EHR after he or she has finished seeing patients. EHRs commonly come up as a major driver of physician burnout. Now, we could pile on and say it's all related to the companies, and I do believe they bear a large part of the responsibility. But there are other factors as well, such as the complicated billing and compliance requirements, and a host of other factors. We need to get everyone together in a room and talk about where we are today and how we can move forward and get some of these issues addressed. And I'm hoping that this conference and the resulting white paper coming out of it will get us started along that path. Uniquely Stanford. Any plan, any strategic plan for any entity at Stanford needs to consider how can we, as a remarkable research university, leverage our resources to have more impact. And there are lots of different ways of doing that. Certainly, one thing that is unique about our academic medical center is that we're so well integrated with the rest of this great research university. When you came in today, you saw this new building going up across the street, across Campus Drive from us. That's a building that will house the Stanford Neuroscience Institute and also a new institute called, by the acronym ChemH, Chemistry, Engineering, and Medicine for Human Health. So both endeavors very much related to our mission in the School of Medicine. These are university facilities. Roughly half the faculty in those two buildings will be School of Medicine faculty. But they'll be working alongside engineers, chemists, biologists. And that sort of synergy is exactly what's going to drive the progress and the innovation that's going to change the face of biomedicine. And Stanford, I think, is uniquely positioned to do that. Not only to do it at the discovery level, but our goal here is to discover those, that make the advances and make the discoveries here first, but then also implement them here first in the patient care arena so that they can be used everywhere. And in that regard, these wonderful new facilities, we opened a new children's hospital in December of last year. If you haven't seen it, you can go by, and the lobby itself is absolutely magnificent. So we have state-of-the-art facilities now for the sickest of the sick children that come to our hospital for care. And we'll open this wonderful new Stanford Hospital in November of 2019, open to patients. We'll have the most technologically advanced facilities on the planet. And now we have, on both ends, the discovery engine, a magnificent clinical enterprise. And now we need to connect them at a faculty level, and connect them with the resources needed to translate fundamental discoveries into treatments, into diagnostics, into care delivery platforms that are implemented and used in humans as well. And I think we have the opportunity to bring together that full circle. So there are lots of enablers that are coming out of our strategic planning process. We need to invest in people in our community. We need to, as I mentioned before, embody value-driven operations, build systems of intelligence, optimize our collaborative environment, both physically as well as virtually, strengthen our organizational alignment among the entities within Stanford Medicine and also with the rest of the university, and seek innovative partnerships and philanthropic support. And I described a few of those partnerships earlier on in my remarks. Our Stanford Medicine strategic planning process also aligns in both intent and in the time sequence with the university's long-range planning process. We've been engaged in that process in earnest during this entire academic year, and the president and provost will be rolling out the initial version of the long-range plan to the Stanford community coming up here later in May. I'm excited by it. I think it's going to reaffirm some of the core values of Stanford University and offer some important and innovative ideas about how we can better leverage the opportunities that we have because we're at this amazing university. So I guess the theme of the remarks is achieving more together. Certainly you're a part of this equation, and your input has always been tremendously valuable to us here, even more so moving forward. It's really heartening to see this room filled. I remember thinking back to my first year here, not sure that we maybe had half to two-thirds of the room filled with people coming back, but I want to thank you for the confidence and the interest you've expressed in us by coming here today. And I'd now like to open it up for your questions or any feedback that you may have. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Sandy Weimer, class of '68. I've always been grateful to Stanford for teaching me general medicine, thinking clinically. I'm a psychiatrist, and I am always interested in all this esoteric science. My career has been largely in the politics and funding of healthcare, and I'm curious. I have a keyhole view of what's going on at Caltech and NASA. My practice is near there, and I'm disturbed by a little bit of it. I'm wondering how much is affecting Stanford and other kinds of institutions like this. But with the shift from government funding to private funding, there seems to be some idiosyncratic direction that's coming out of some of these charities that are saying, we want you to do this in this way, and the freedom of the scientists, it seems to be compromised. And I'm curious what you think. My particular view has been through atmosphere science, and that is pretty interesting given the current political situation. So I wonder if you could comment. Thank you.
Very important observations. We are certainly seeing a change in the face and the character of major philanthropy in biomedicine in America today. So the generation of young philanthropists who have made extraordinary wealth, largely through technology, this is a generation of extraordinarily bright people that want to be actively engaged in how their philanthropy is used. So let me describe two examples. We, Stanford, are a part of the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub. This was an initiative launched by Priscilla Chan, Mark Zuckerberg. Now it's been a little over 2 years ago and rolled out really formally this past year. There are this is a $600 million commitment by them over 10 years to fund projects at the three institutions in Northern California, UCSF, UC Berkeley, and Stanford. There are two overall themes to the work. One is infectious diseases. The other is building a comprehensive cell atlas, an atlas of all the metabolic interactions in a cell. And there are currently about 47 faculty at the three institutions, 19 at Stanford, who are being funded by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Now that's amazing. And all of this is fundamental discovery-based research. There's no clinical trials. In fact, no direct translational research being funded, although a lot of the discovery-based research for sure translates very quickly. There are a number of new things in that relationship that, frankly, were a significant departure from the way we have engaged with philanthropists in the past. So one is that there's a strong feeling that the universities should be responsible for what is sometimes called overhead, but it covers everything from the electricity that runs the lab to building the new buildings. That the universities themselves should be responsible for that, not from a facilities and administration charge that usually accompanies philanthropy or direct grants. So in fact, it's a large amount of money, but there's also a large amount of money being put in by the institutions to make sure that that money can be effectively deployed. So that was one difference. The other is that the intellectual property emanating from investigators and projects being funded by the BioHub is going to be managed by BioHub IT and tech transfer people, not by the host institutions. That, on the surface, I think worried many of us a lot. I think actually it's going to work out well in that there is a royalty and equity sharing agreement that's a part of it. And I do think that they're going to have good people managing the intellectual property and commercializing it. But these were radical departures from the way we had done business in the past. The other relationship I would describe just briefly under that same heading is that we are one of now 8 institutions in the Parker Institute of Cancer Immunotherapy, an initiative that Sean Parker funded also a couple of years ago, initially with $250 million, really to focus on cancer immunotherapy, to make sure that participating institutions could be brought together and collaborate with one another in ways that had been a challenge in the past. So this is new territory for all of us. But I also think as an institutional leader, that we would be irresponsible not to be moving forward in these discussions. So here are a few things that we will never compromise in any relationship. We will never compromise the academic freedom of our faculty. That is the freedom of our faculty to do the research that they want to do in the way they want to do it, and to publish whatever they choose to publish when they want to publish it. I think maintaining that bedrock principle is going to be really important as we consider other relationships moving forward. Thank you. Other questions?
First, I want to thank the entire organizing group for an absolutely extraordinary day.
Great.
And extraordinary. And Dean Minor, yours was far and away the most inspiring dean talk I've ever heard in any of the institutions where I've worked. So thank you for that.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now I have a really simple question.
Sure.
After praising you one more time for what you've done for PhD students to fund the first 4 years, that's a phenomenal advance. Now, what about medical student debt? What can you do? What are your thoughts about that? And I have a particular interest in the problems of fields that are underfunded, like geriatrics, for example. You know, we learned a lot about aging today. It happens to be my field. But people are not going into geriatric medicine and or geriatric psychiatry, the two specialty fields in geriatrics. And they are not being trained in basic science or aging science. Mm-hmm. They're being trained in a kind of mostly vague clinical specialty. It can be enormously valuable, but it isn't enough to advance the field of aging by combining the extraordinary strength of this kind of basic science with clinical insight, which can only come from the side of seeing patients. So what about doing something about medical student accrued debt so that people going into under-resourced fields can actually do it?
It's a great point. So let me describe a few initiatives. One is that among our peer group of the top research medical schools in the United States, we have, I think, still the lowest average graduating debt of any schools in our peer group. And just in the past couple of years, we've introduced a number of new measures as well. So for example, providing full tuition and cost of living scholarships to our most needy students. All of our admissions are done in a completely need-blind manner, and we provide need-based resources. We do not have, in the School of Medicine, we have no merit-based financial aid. All of the aid that we provide is based upon need. And we've sought and we've calculated the aid that we provide in order to keep that debt level as low as we possibly can. I think it's a good point, and I've had some preliminary discussions, and we actually know, back of the envelope calculation, what it would be to endow the school well enough that there would be no tuition for anyone. It's a very, very big number. So, you know, the PhDs, it is a great, you know, with PhDs, it's, I mean, there are so many other sources of, for example, federal funding. Still, the philanthropy has been absolutely essential for the PhD support, but still a majority of the support for those students is coming from federal training grants. We have nothing like that, you know, for medical school tuition or room and board. So, you know, this is something we're very much aware of. I think what I want to make sure is that we keep the average graduating debt low so that people will not be encumbered with enormous debt, which, as you said, steers them in certain career directions rather than others. And I would love to further explore what we can do to, I'd love it if Stanford was a place that eliminated tuition altogether, but I think that's going to be a while in the making. Thank you for your question. Other questions? Yes. Okay. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Okay. My question has to do with stringing all of these different values that you articulated so well together. And I'm wondering if you see a path forward and a unique role that Stanford can play in integrating all of these various sources of clinical and biometric, physiologic, personal preference, that sort of, from the patient side, data together to fundamentally change the culture of medicine.
Right.
Because with artificial intelligence, you can start analyzing pieces of information that don't make any obvious sense. Claims data, for example, all of that together into some uniform database that will shorten the amount of time people spend with physicians and providers, because there'll be more narrow probabilities of what's going on. So diagnosis won't take as much time up. And spending more time in critical thinking and evolving the role that people play so that they don't get so stressed about data entry and lack of interoperability and that sort of thing.
Right. Let me give you one example of something I think brings those elements together. And it's an example I feel particularly proud of here at Stanford. And it's also an opportunity for me to give a shout out to a person who in just a few minutes we're going to honor here. So Dr. Maldonado and several colleagues here obtained an NIH grant, large NIH grant, to support a center called SPHERE, the acronym SPHERE, Stanford Precision Health for Ethnic and Racial Equity. And one of the projects being supported by SPHERE is led by Tom Robinson, a professor of pediatrics here. And what Tom has been interested in throughout his career is childhood obesity. And this project, supported by SPHERE, looks at obesity among Latino American children. So Tom now has around 250 children in their family in the Santa Clara County area who are enrolled and participating in this study. Now, yes, we're doing genome sequencing, microbiome, lots of different metabolic analyses to look at determinants of obesity. But also, we're really trying, Tom and his team, and this was the whole intent of SPHERE, is really trying to, in parallel with that, look at the social, environmental, and behavioral determinants of health. Because even if we, and I have no doubt that we will, gain enormous insights into the interaction with the genome and the microbiome, even armed with that knowledge, it's still not necessarily going to change the outcome, right? In order to change the outcome, we've got to dig much deeper. And unfortunately, digging into and understanding and then impacting those social, environmental, and behavioral determinants frequently is far more difficult than doing the informatics related to the genome or the microbiome. And Tom is a very rigorous scientist. He all the way from being able to do the very best genomics to the very finest social sciences type research. So one thing that he did, and this is recently published, is he offered to the families to replace the cooking and eating utensils in the household, and to replace, as a part of the study, and assuming the cost, and to replace them with smaller utensils, reasoning that if you cook less food, people may eat less. And guess what? That actually turns out to be the case. So when I look at that study, and the amazing work that Bonnie Maldonado did in pulling together a group of faculty to make this a reality, to me it brings together what Stanford can really do. The very finest biomedical science for sure, but not stopping there. Getting out into our communities that have every right to look to us to be able to offer engagement with them and hopefully solutions with them to some of the most complex health challenges we have today, and then to actually be able to carry that through and in so doing affect favorably the lives of many, many people. So SPHERE brings it all together for me conceptually. There are lots of other examples too, but I would just cite that one. So thank you all for being here today. Enjoy the rest of the day and the evening. Thank you.